Good evening, everyone. I'm Scott Harrison, coming to you live from Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I'm going to tag Tone in this video. I want to welcome you to Talking Theater Live. I'm the artistic director of Ironweed Productions, and I'm very honored to welcome this evening as my guest, Santa Fe actor, director, producer, and musician, Tone Forrest. Tone, thank you and welcome.
Well, thank you, Scott. I'm honored to be here.
Looking forward to this. For those of you joining us for the first time, Talking Theater Live is a series of 30-minute interviews between myself and Santa Fe theater artists, sharing stories about their experiences in the theater and also what unique paths brought them to creating theater in Santa Fe. So, Tone, I just wanted to start at the beginning. This is actually not...
to begin at the beginning.
To begin at the beginning, yes. And I usually like to start kind of back at the top, but this was just actually a question, but just more of a reflection. I remember we worked together back 6 years ago now on Our Town, and I was thinking about that this morning, and just that play. I mean, it holds a special. It'll always hold a special place for me, and it's just been, for me, it's one of those where the message of the story about just appreciating life and how quickly it passes you by, and those connections you have just been. It's been really resonant for me, especially since doing that show. And I was thinking this morning, even three of the people that were in that production, Craig Barnes, Scott Anderson, Dan Garrity, have passed since we did that show. Anyway, it's one of those experiences where kind of the life on stage, you kind of find yourself living it afterwards, which is it was a really powerful experience.
I was really honored that you chose me to do the stage manager. Of course, that's the only role in the play, Grover's Corners, at the turn of the century that could reasonably be done by a black guy. So but the fact that you, even with the equity contract situation, that you chose me to do that that was real big to me. And that was hard. Because it's all monologue. It's so almost no dialogue for the stage manager. And usually when you memorize things, it comes with the dialogue action, situational. But this was just, you had to have the story and you had to have it all right. And, in my old age, I have more trouble with lines than I used to when I was younger. And I remember you really cracking the whip. And that was what I needed.
Wow, that was that was just a really special one for me, and it's just one of those things that I think the message of the play just continues to resonate with me about just appreciating people and moments and time. And for me, it's interesting because I live in Santa Fe. This is the longest I've lived anywhere. My dad was in the military, so Lisa and I have been here for 15 years, and so just really experiencing all those things of a, community, the joys, the losses, just all the things that you go through. How long have you been in Santa Fe?
It's 18 years now. I came here turn of the century, 2000.
And what brought you out here?
Judy, my wife. She was teaching art in Orange County when we lived in L.A., and I was in basically a dead-end job with a cable company doing commercial edit. Nothing to do with theater, nothing to do with music. And one day I heard Judy crying in the bathroom. She used to have to get up in the dark to drive to where she had to go. And I knew why. I mean, she hated teaching. She hated the job. She had middle schoolers.
Yeah.
And I said, Judy, I know you hate Los Angeles. We don't have to stay here. Where do you want to go? Out of her mouth, without a beat, she said Santa Fe. So, I had no idea. I'm East Coast. I'm a coastal urban Negro. L.A., New York. That was it all my life.
Yeah.
The first time we came here, it was dark late at night. We stayed at the La Fonda, and it was all like short brown houses. Judy was steeped in the Southwest milieu, but short brown houses. And when we moved into our place on Jemez, when we finally moved here, August 3rd, 2000, there was a motorcycle shop across the street. I looked out the window, and there were these four skinheads working on a motorcycle. I said, Judy, where the fuck did you bring me?
Wow. No worries.
Yeah, okay. And also at the La Fonda, that night we went downstairs, and in the lounge, where I played many times since then, but I had no idea, there were a bunch of guys in cowboy boots and cowboy hats doing two-steps. And... But people across the street with the motorcycle shop turned out to be the nicest people in the world.
Wow.
And La Fonda turned out to be a great venue for the music I play. So things worked out. When I moved here, I wasn't playing music. I wasn't acting. I hadn't been on stage for 20 years.
Is that right?
Yep. And inside of 3 months, I had... the first two jobs I auditioned for, plus I was in the best band that I'd ever been in my life. Inside that first, before the end of November, from August to November, all of a sudden I was bigger fish, smaller pond.
Now, what was the show that you, or the project you auditioned for?
Stories, well, Craig. That's when I got hooked up with Craig for his Queen Elizabeth I.
Mm-hmm.
And Stories of the Season, which was it was a holiday play, and it was done at the old Firestone. Remember that theater? I don't know.
I don't think I know that. No, I don't.
Yeah, it was on right at the end of Water Street. It's a bank now.
Okay.
But I think that was the name. Anyway, we were in there, and that was my first time on stage. In front of an audience in 20 years. I remember distinctly during the dress rehearsals being backstage and seeing that blue light glow that, when you're dark in the wings and you got the light coming on. And I just had this feeling wash over me. I'm home. This is where I live. This is where I belong.
Oh, gosh.
So the theater had been my life since I was like 16, so.
Gosh, now, so what first lit your fire about doing theater when you were young? How did you get started?
It was the same kind of thing. I got involved in a social studies play. That's all I remember about it.
Huh.
But it was about pioneers, and I didn't even have lines. They just put me in a hat and a coat, and they gave me a fake shotgun, and all I had to do was walk out on stage. And all of the schools in those days, they had the flip-up multicolored footlights.
Okay, yeah.
Which nobody knew how to use. They were just part of it,
Yeah.
But I walked out there, and people and the lights, and it just felt right. And that was when I was in junior high school.
Yeah.
When I got to high school, I got into the drama class, and we had this great teacher, and she spotted 4 people in the class who were above what she was used to in, junior class English. So she entered the 4 of us in a competition. Hofstra has a Shakespeare competition for high schools. And you enter a scene, and you get best actor and best scene and all of that. So we did a scene from Hamlet, the Laertes Ophelia scene. And I was Claudius. And she went for period dress because she could rent it.
Yeah.
So I was in a morning coat with a sash, and I was 15, and I'm playing Claudius the King, and so I was.
That's cool.
At Hofstra, big stage, big crowd. I got special mention for my posture. That was my first review.
That's great. Excellent.
But that was also my introduction to what at the time they called open casting, of which there was very little when I started. But now, I mean, that's how it can mostly work.
Right.
And the 60s, everything seemed possible. You know,
Yeah.
I ended up dropping out of Queens College to go to New York City and be an actor.
And when was that, 1960?
64.
Oh, man.
I got my first summer stock job doing A Taste of Honey, another play of the time that happened to have a black actor in it. And I must have done that show 3 times, but the first time was at Queens College, and the next time was in summer stock the following year. And I got paid for it, and they flew me up because I was a last-minute replacement, and that was it. As far as I was concerned, I was a professional actor.
Yeah. And where was that? Where did you do summer stock?
That was in Hampton, the Hampton Playhouse, Hampton, New Hampshire. That was my first summer stock. I came up the old-fashioned way. I did a couple of apprentice seasons. I got my equity contract after a journeyman season at a repertory theater in New Jersey. I did my, in order to get a contract with the Pittsburgh Playhouse, I had to sign on also as an assistant stage manager. So besides being in the shows, I also ran a couple of the shows I wasn't in. That was like 67, 68.
Yeah.
And then I was involved in this company called, Here I Go. I told you.
Yeah. This is
with the Young People's Repertory Theater. They had this big audition, and it was my first experience with what we call method acting. The director of this theater that she was putting together, she wanted to prove to Lee Strasberg that people under 18 could still reach the emotional levels that he demanded. And you know, he felt that wasn't show. So he felt you had to have the maturity and experience of life in order to be able to tap the emotions. And I'm going to prove him wrong. So she started this company, and the audition was really strange. You know, you had to pick a character. And I picked Tybalt.
Yeah.
And this other actor, we're all on stage at the same time, and this other actor had picked Romeo. And boy, that lit me up. So I got into that company.
Yeah.
Terry Hayden, she was a actor studio stalwart, and she was the director of that theater. I ended up dropping out to take another repertory job because I needed the money and I wanted to not rehearse but to be on the stage again.
Yeah.
But what I learned in that period drove me in that direction. And in 1969, I auditioned for the Actors Studio, and I was one of the 3 accepted that year: Trish Van Devere, Dimo Kondos, and me. And that's one of the proudest moments of my life, really. Other than the pride of belonging and all of the things that I got to experience over the years by just going to the studio sessions, it never really did anything else for me except inform my process. I use little pieces of everything. And, I'm not a real go-inside actor, but I can when I need to.
Yeah.
Words. I'm a lover of words. That's why I love Under Milk Woods so much.
Yeah.
And pretty much Our Town, too.
Yeah.
The way that's constructed.
Yeah.
I never thought much of that. I never saw it. I'm one of the few people who managed to get through a lifetime without seeing Our Town. I never read it. I just heard about it, and in my mind, it was just an old chestnut. And then when I finally got the script and went through it, I realized what an amazing craft work that was, especially the time that he did it.
Yeah.
I mean, bare stage.
Just breaking all the barriers.
Yep.
I know.
Fourth wall, everything.
Yeah.
A whole new deal. And
Wow. So when you were in your time at the actor studio, were there particular people that you just that were just? I mean, I know there are incredible people that work there, but were there a couple that just really resonated with you in terms of their work or
In
other
terms of their
lessons?
work, well, I saw a lot of good work, and I saw a lot of the process at the studio is creating.
Yeah.
There's no end product, so you see a lot of things that are not formed for performance.
Right.
You see the work, and that's what you're supposed to look at. And the work is very specific. It's what Lee Strasberg has always done, the Stanislavski,
Yeah.
his version of the Stanislavski method. And I remember seeing Al Pacino working with Alan Garfield as director on a Hamlet scene, and it was just excruciating to watch. It was excruciating. But in terms of the people, I was on the Actors Studio softball team right at the beginning of, and Al was the shortstop, and he was really good. He had a bad leg, but that didn't stop him. He was really a good player. And, we had people popping in and out.
Yeah.
I remember De Niro playing first base at one point.
That's great.
I mean, a whole bunch of people. It was the Broadway Show League. So all the people who were in Broadway shows who could actually play ball were there. And the Actors Studio just had a permanent team. And the biggest cheerleader at every game, Shelley Winters.
Is that right?
So that helped.
Yeah. Gosh.
Just rubbing elbows and the, seeing the work.
Yeah.
And sometimes I can pull it up.
Yeah. That's great. And you now being in New York in the in the 60s, and I was just finished a biography about Sam Shepard, and I'm always the 60s, the late 60s in New York. To me, that just seemed like such a exciting time. I mean, just with the the off Broadway movement, theater popping up all over the place. What was it like in New York at that time?
Well, first off, being a young black actor, that kind of changed everything because there weren't a lot of roles that you could be cast in.
Yeah.
And secondly, it was the time of the revolution and black power and urban grit. And I wasn't really good at that. I mean, I came from what in my mind was a classical background. I wanted to do Hamlet. And I couldn't fake the down-home urban gritty thing. Although I did a couple of small roles in films like what's the name of that Woody Allen movie? Bananas. I think I was cut out of that one. But I wore the same army jacket and had the same afro in those movies because that's what they were looking for. Brian De Palma's one of his first films with Robert De Niro and Graham Garrett was the sequel to Greetings, which was called Hi Mom. And he had a thing in that called Be Black Baby. And that's what the role was about, a militant, big afro. And that was the social milieu at the time, and it didn't really suit me.
Yeah.
Ultimately, that's why I ended up dropping out. There were other reasons too. I went to California and sat by my phone waiting for the agent to call for 4 years. Did a lot of good theater out there, but that's not what LA is about.
Right.
And by the time I came back to New York, I ended up going to film production. Started off as a PA, ended up as a production coordinator. But I just felt at least I'm still in the business. Then when don't want to go there.
No worries.
I
Well,
was married to a soap opera actress in the 90s, and so I was the guy on her elbow, when she went to the big events, and that just kind of I was a better actor than she was, but all of that. So after 6 years, and that's when I met Judy, and life has been just, in terms of relationships, it's been a total joy since then.
Yeah.
Judy Bever.
And so you meet her in New York and moved to LA, or did you meet her in LA?
I met her in LA.
In LA. So, and then now had she, I know you'd said Judy has kind of, had been exposed to the Southwest.
Yeah.
Had she been to Santa Fe before when she picked that? Oh,
she lived in South Dakota, and she had family in Oklahoma, and they used to drive, and they passed through Santa Fe. She remembers La Fonda. She remembers sopapillas being one of her very favorite things. Mm-hmm. And then they moved to Oklahoma. Her father was director of wildlife or agriculture, something like that. Mm-hmm. I can't remember. But he was a pioneer in the green field, and that just didn't work in Oklahoma. But Judy ended up going to OU, and all of her, she had an aunt whose house in Oklahoma was all New Mexico. Mm-hmm. So she got to love that stuff. And then, of course, she's an artist, and there's the art connection here. Mm-hmm. When we moved in together in L.A. in '97, there were all these things in the house that, it was a style. It was an obvious style, but I knew nothing about the Southwest until I came here, and then it all came together.
That's,
yeah.
Now, I'm curious, when you were little, do you have an early memory of, not necessarily, theater, but just when you were first captured by make-believe or play acting? Do you have anything that when you were small?
It's hard to be specific. I mean, I was a make-believe guy. I loved to play make-believe. And my family, my parents were immigrants from Panama and Jamaica. So I was very much assimilating everything in this culture and everything on television. Just, I absorbed it. I remember going, my father got tickets to the Julius LaRosa TV show. And Steve Lawrence and Edie Gourmet were the guests, and also Henny Youngman with his fiddle. And I think I was about maybe 12 or so. And, it was all kind of, so this is how, they had the applause sign lighting up, and the seats were above some of the lights, So, I mean, that was my experience in seeing how that went. But the first thing I remember in terms of performance that really got me is when Joe Papp's touring Shakespeare group came to my high school and did a live performance of Romeo and Juliet. Mm. And James Earl Jones was playing a small role.
Oh, my gosh.
He was the first black actor that I ever saw doing something classical. This was about 1960.
Yeah.
And, then he became like my hero. I saw him do Lear. I saw him do Macbeth. I went to the final preview of The Great White Hope before it opened on Broadway, and I took my mother and I said, "Mom, this is going to be a major, major hit, and the man's going to be a star, and you have to see him."
Oh, gosh.
And many years later, when I was working in L.A., at Samuel French. My mother happened to be visiting, and James Earl Jones happened to be doing a book signing. So I made her come up, and he signed her book and mine. And I told him that, seeing him play Caliban in Central Park was one of the things that inspired me to go on and be an actor. And so he wrote that inscription in the book. I think I still have it.
That is something. That's so great when you meet people that just have had such an influence on you, and they're generous, and they're oh man. when you were young, was music something that came to you when you were young too, or did that?
I didn't start playing an instrument until I was in high school. I had a girlfriend who was a great folk guitar player.
Yeah.
And so I started learning folk guitar from her. But I sang in the midnight mass choir at church, and when I got into high school, I was in the chorus there, tenor. And then when I got into college, I sang the Messiah with the Queens College Choral Society, I think it was called. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, that was great because I couldn't read music, so I had, just like I still can't. So I had to learn everything. And I can still, to this day, I can sing both tenor and bass parts to the entire Messiah from my head. I mean, I just connected so with the music and the harmonies. And listening to rock and roll in the 50s when I was coming up and later in the 60s when I was getting closer to it, the bass line was always the thing that stuck in my head, and it's always the thing. It's the glue that holds the music together. And I think a lot of people know that now, but I didn't realize it till I started playing bass, which was much later.
And how, when you're curious, I started a few years ago just learning how to play the banjo.
Yeah,
it's very rudimentary, but I love it. I mean, and it's such a different
what
kind
style?
of mindset.
What style do you play?
The
Railing?
It's not the claw hammer. It's not claw hammer. It's just
Scruggs?
three fingers.
Scruggs.
Scruggs style. But I was just curious, when you're performing as a musician versus performing as an actor, kind of, are there differences, similarities?
Absolute, total, completely different.
Different.
Yeah.
What's different about being performing as a musician?
If you are an entertainer, if you have an act, if you have a show, then your number one job is to entertain your audience. Mm-hmm. If you are just a musician, then you have a responsibility for entertaining too, but your main responsibility is to the music and to the groove, and especially for a bass player. Mm-hmm. So I run the Canyon Road Blues Jam at El Faro. I've been doing that for like 11 years. Mm-hmm. And there's a whole lot of fuss and muss and production kind of stuff. Yeah. But when I sit down and start to play, and I'm still playing by ear, and very often making it up as I go along, because I can now. Mm-hmm. I've been playing over 40 years. And there's this thing that you're going after if you're doing it right. Mm-hmm. And when you get it, it's nirvana. I mean, it's this. Acting is different. You do have a responsibility to the audience, but you have a responsibility to the play and the people you're working with, and to your own art standard. And the muscles are different, both in the head and in the body. They both happen to be performance, but they're just entirely different. For me.
Yeah. Interesting.
But it keeps me on stage, one or the other.
Yeah.
And the stage is where I belong.
Yeah. Well, being able to go back and forth between the two, I imagine too, just kind of you can kind of feed each other.
Theater is harder because, you're doing Ironweed. You really have to work at it to get what you need. Music is just more work. I mean, it's not hard to go after booking a gig. It's just tedious. Mm-hmm. It's all for the music, but all this stuff you have to do to get there is not creative.
Yeah.
Whereas with the theater, a lot of what you have to do to get there is creative.
Interesting. Now, how do you feel from the time you started doing theater when you were 16 to now? How do you feel theater has changed?
Well, I have changed, that's for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
My goals have changed. I mean, I'm in Santa Fe now, and I'm going to be here forever.
Yeah.
When I did get to Santa Fe and the world got smaller,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, we're kind of like in the middle of the desert here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's
Mm-hmm.
Albuquerque, and then that's another thing. I got off the plane, and we were taking the shuttle up from the airport, and there was nothing. You know, I'm from an urban environment.
Yeah.
I'm looking around. There's like nothing. So, I mean, we're in a little artistic pocket in the middle of New Mexico, northern New Mexico, that we are here. And so this is pretty much my theater world now. Yeah. And watching that ebb and flow has been really interesting. When I first got here, I remember seeing Midsummer Night's Dream at when Shakespeare in Santa Fe was still over at the St. John's.
St. John's, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And, all right, I'm not going to be critical. I just looked and I said, my goodness, I'll bet I could do better than that. And the opportunity came along with Craig Barnes and later Walter Dilts, and we managed to start, based on Craig's Queen Elizabeth trilogy, mm-hmm. which was the beginning. We liked what we did together, so we started the Red Thread Collective, and we had a pretty good run of 10 years or so. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of morphed into Red Thread Santa Fe Productions now, but it's not the same. It's not a 501c3. Mm-hmm. It's a production company. Mm-hmm. But working with Craig Barnes was a joy. Mm-hmm. I mean, brilliant man. Mm-hmm. And he just took a flyer. He was an absolute devotee of Shakespeare. And so when he retired from his law practice and had something he wanted to do, he wanted to write Shakespeare. So he wrote plays in the Elizabethan style, which is not easy to do. Mm-hmm. But he made them work, mm-hmm. and he did the trilogy. And then there's Walter Dilts, our producer. There used to be an organization called SALT here, which was kind of a sort of think tankish. Mm-hmm. Kind of. Craig, when he was putting his play together, he met Walter there, and he was casting the show, and there was the role of a bishop, and he went to Walter and he said, well, how would you like to be in my play? Walter's never been near theater, knows nothing mm-hmm. about it. And he said that. He said, well, you know, I'm not an actor. I don't know anything about that. And Craig, and this is a watershed moment here, he said, well, how would you like to produce it? And, Walter was retired and apparently had some disposable income. He said yes. And that was his first foray as a producer. And he liked it. He loved the theater. Mm-hmm. He'd never been really exposed before. Now he's involved in theater and also in documentary film production. He's going all over the place mm-hmm. for that. But aside from the money, his support of theater in Santa Fe has been enormous mm-hmm. since the year 2001 up to today. We're involved with Janet Davidson and Forgiving Productions now, and we've done 2 shows with her, mm-hmm. The Country House and Almost Maine. She likes to pull them fresh out of New York. Mm-hmm. And we've got another one coming up beginning of the summer, and it's called The Sweetest Swing in Baseball. Mm-hmm. It has absolutely nothing to do with baseball.
That's what I heard, yeah.
And a lot more to do with the world of commercial art.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's great to still be in the game.
Yeah.
Also, and you know, doing Our Town and then doing Driving Miss Daisy. Yeah. To die for roles. I'm just as happy being a production manager and making things happen to keep the theater that I care about going as I am being on a stage. Unless there's a role like Hoke or the stage manager. If somebody come to me with that, I'm there.
Are there any roles that you would love to have the opportunity to play?
I just passed by Othello. I can't do that anymore. I'm too old. But all the roles I really care about, I'm too old for now. There was Slow Dance on the Killing Ground. Do you remember that play?
I don't know. I've heard of it, but I'm not familiar with it.
Clarence Williams III played this role, and I'd actually gotten to the Actors Studio using that for my audition. I would love to have done that.
Yeah.
But why am I blocking his name? The first show that I did off Broadway was done by I'm blocking his name, so I won't do it. But a famous playwright who came out of the off Broadway tradition. Can't remember his name. I don't believe it. Old age.
Well, Tone, I just wanted to finish off with just one final question here. I wanted to ask, is there a particular experience either that you've had or that you kind of strive for when you're either rehearsing a play or you're on stage, where when you have that moment you're just like, this is why I love doing theater, or this is what makes me feel alive? Does my question make sense?
Yeah, and different kinds of moments. So the moments that I had in our town, they were all me. I mean, I didn't have to, assume a character or do that play so universal. You don't have to do a New England accent to have it be right. And so there were moments in there, like when you staged the time capsule scene at the foot of the stage. I mean, that was an example of, this is why I do it, because I can do this and I can make it mean something. But two moments that stood out for me since I've been in Santa Fe, in the first play of Craig's trilogy, Queen Elizabeth I, I played this playwright, Sir Josh Falsteer, and his lady love dies at the end of the play, and I have this scene, this death scene with her, and I pulled out all the stops on that, and it was at the end of this kind of a performance, and then all of a sudden, it had to get real, and that was one of my, I can still do this moments, because that was like one of the first shows I did in 20 years. I'll never forget, it was the opening weekend, and El Museo is in the rail yard, and the train goes right by the back wall, and just right in the middle of that scene. There's no way you can play off a train in Elizabethan times. Right in the middle of that scene, the train comes through. One time, when I was doing Master Harold and the Boys, which is my third favorite.
Yeah, I love that production, yeah.
It was a matinee performance, and it was very early in the play, and I'm sitting at a table, and the train came through. And I looked at my watch. I said, "Oh, they're 2:15 right on time." And moments like that, where exterior things work.
Yeah.
I remember seeing Barbara Billingsley do. She was playing Portia in the open air theater at the Delacorte in Central Park, and she walked out for that scene, and it started to rain. And she put her hands out. She said, "The quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven."
Oh my God!
Moments like that, they just So that was
magical. Yeah.
And I got a huge laugh too. I mean that's
that is excellent.
But most of the time the train was
yeah, the urban theater, I know.
But El Museo, I mean, when we did our first show there were birds living in the building, there were holes in the ceiling, it was not insulated, so if it rained, you couldn't perform.
Yeah.
There was too much noise. And with Walter's help and with the opera, Santa Fe Opera, we actually created a theater at El Museo, and it's been a viable space for quite a while.
It has, yeah. We've done several shows there.
Well,
Tone,
it was our home.
Yeah. How many you did? How many Red Thread shows did you do there?
About 10.
Yeah. Well, Tone, thank you so much for this time. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
I have so much respect for what you do. I mean, you drag this Ironweed Productions thing uphill by yourself, and you do nothing but good work. And,
well, that means a lot. Thank you. That means a lot to me. Thank you,
Once
Tone.
again,
Yes,
thank you.
really enjoyed this. And thank you all very much for joining us. Again, this is Talking Theater Live. We will post this on our Ironweed Productions Facebook page. And Theater Santa Fe has also generously given us a page on their website. It's on the Community tab, Talking Theater Live. So this will be posted on the Theater Santa Fe website as well. Stay tuned for information about our upcoming interviews. But thank you again for joining us, and good night.
Adios.